Scouts. They are not a very dangerous thing in this game, typically. They don't really pose much of a threat. Or do they? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Kurojakku, and today we will be going over my Age of Wonders 4 Redguard build that I have developed, which is going to be focused around the new Nomad faction that came out in the most recent expansion at the time of recording this, and a very interesting unit in the Nomad faction, which is their Scout unit, which are insanely broken due to a special unique trait that they have, which lets them count as both a Scout and an Archer, and this is going to come into play a lot. Also, this faction is probably one of the weirder ones in terms of rulers. It is a bit of a stretch. You could go a different route with it, but we'll talk more about that later. For now, let's start with the racial traits. So, in Elder Scrolls lore, Redguards typically are known for being very, very good fighters, especially swordsmen in particular. So this is going to be a faith-focused swordsman build. In a way, we're going to be playing around it not through units, but through heroes specifically, so we'll come back to that. Also, they're known as being kind of swashbucklers, or rogues, or bandits, which the scout gameplay is going to kind of play into. So, first we have Careless. This is a very aggressive faction in terms of the way we're playing it. We're using a ton of scouts to swarm the enemy and fill them with arrows, and we're going to use a lot of shock units. Or by shock units, I mean shock heroes. So you don't really often end your turn in defense mode anyways, meaning this becomes free, and it's not really a drawback as long as you're playing fast and aggressive and you aren't in defense mode. We are running Keen-Sighted. This is going to give us accuracy on all our missile and magic attacks. Very, very important when we're running a Scout Archer-based faction. And then Strong, as this buffs both the melee and missile damage of all of your attacks. The whole goal here was to buff up Scouts as much as I possibly could. So both of these are going to buff the Scouts. This is going to give them additional damage, and that's going to bring me to Chariot Mounts. This is a mount trait. I looked at all the different mount traits we have on offer before I really decided this would be a Redguard build. And the way mount traits work basically is they will either turn your optional cavalry units into cavalry, and any unit that already has a mount will get their mount replaced, which includes our scouts. So all of these 3-cost ones are the flying mounts. None of them really gave any value. They're all technically just skins of each other. They all do the exact same thing. They have no additional traits, but I didn't really think flying gave a lot of value to the actual scout unit, and you notice it gives no additional health. So one big thing with scouts is they are going to be very squishy. They're going to be very vulnerable to damage. They will do good damage, but they also will take a lot of damage. So beefing them up is honestly very important. It's narrowed it down to chariots. Elephants seemed like a good option, or mammoths. And Dire Bear was one I was considering. I believe this works on ranged attacks as well, so 40% damage against units in defense mode could be pretty strong. But I went with chariot mounts, and the reason why: you get a little extra health, which is nice, but the really important thing is it reduces the members in your unit to 1, which, as you can see on the screen, means you're immune to casualties. You can have a scout at 1 HP and they will still hit for full damage. Because scouts are so squishy, they tend to take casualties very, very quickly because they have very low defenses and low HP, meaning they get wounded, then they do half damage. This counteracts that entirely. It's basically like getting a perk like Tenacious, and then on top of a mount perk for the same amount of perk points. Now to talk about the culture. That's going to be the nomads, the new culture. Their unique trait is that they can pack up their cities and move them around the map. However, in a couple test games I've played with my nomads, or with my Redguards, sorry, I actually didn't really mess with that aspect of the mechanic too much. I was fine leaving the cities where they're at. Nomads have a special trait where whenever you have a resource node in your domain, you will overharvest it. This will then make it a permanent resource of the same value in your actual camp. So when you pack up and move, you take all the iron mines and gold mines with you. I did another video with nomads using the Conquerors, which we're not using today. If you want to see that one, that's the Falmer one. Go look at that one. It'll be in the playlist. Today we're using the Scavengers. Their unique trait is they get Wonder Scavenging, allowing them to extract essences from ancient wonders, and This looted power buff is a stacking buff that does not drop off. It will stay put throughout that entire instance of combat, meaning it has a potential, if you fully buff a single unit, to have +5 defense, +5 resistance, and plus 100% damage or double damage. Support abilities also heal more, but that's not really important. When we're talking about the scouts, we're looking at the other two stats. We will move on to society traits. First one is going to be Seekers of Wonders. This lets us spawn with an ancient wonder next to us the moment we start the game. They also do not require population to annex. This gives us a early head start and immediately lets us use our scavenger perk of getting a little special resource out of ancient wonders. We also get additional production at the start of the game because we'll spawn with a nearby ancient wonder cleared. This is where I got a little creative. See, there's not a lot of late game, like tier 3, tier 4 swordsmen in terms of troop choices. We did get a new unit with the Warlord, but they don't have swords. I used them in the Nord video. They're very, very fun, but they didn't really fit what I was going for. So instead I took a different approach. We're going to spam out a lot of really, really cheap scout units as the bulk of our armies. And then to back them up, we will have elite hero units as those swordsman units that I don't really have available in the game. So we're going to make them all warriors. We're going to give them all two-handed swords, build them like shock units, only they get really strong hero equipment. One of the issues I usually run into with Cult of Personality is just struggling to have enough units to fill all the armies for all the extra heroes I have running around. But when all your units are tier 1 scouts, this really is not that hard to do. Skipping over tomes, because we'll come back to that when we start talking about units, we'll quickly touch on the ruler, which is a bit of a stretch. I'm gonna be honest, it's a bit of a stretch here. I wanted to have fun with it. I wanted to go a little over the top like I have with other factions. You could, and maybe arguably should, go with a champion ruler and just make it a Redguard like Sword Singer. I thought to do Saisahan. In fact, I think I made a Saisahan in the advanced settings. I did make Saisahan as a potential. So here's his settings. If you want to use him as a champion ruler instead, that's probably what I would go with for the ruler, but I wanted to be a little crazy with it. So instead, I went with a Eldritch Sovereign. I went with a Sword Saint of Redguard mythology, which is Lecky, hence all the swords kind of hovering behind her. The idea was basically, it's a swordsman that has ascended so far beyond that they no longer need to use a sword anymore, which is part of Redguard lore. That is something that they do, where they basically start off as swordsmen and through spiritualism end up being able to conjure a sword out of thin air effectively to fight with, and eventually surpass that to a point where they're just smiting things with holy magic. Hence, the Eldritch Sovereign, technically we're not really playing around any of the thralls or any of the Eldritch mechanics. I just thought it'd be really cool to build a faith-focused, order-focused Eldritch ruler. It's a bit of a contradiction, so I thought it was a cool idea. If you don't like it, just go with a champion instead. If you do like it, here are all the settings. And then we're of course going with a Battle Saint as the hero class. Here are all the settings for the race. Nothing special, nothing fancy in here. No weird tricks up my sleeve with this one, they're just humans. Now, real quick, just like last time, let's briefly go over all of the tomes that we're going to be working with today, starting with Tome of Zeal. This is for Legion of Zeal, this is for Inspiring Chant, Condemnation. Circle of Zealtry is all right, but mostly this is to give all of our units Zeal. Keep in mind one very important thing as we go through. Any and all enchantments that are considered ranged enchantments, where they can go on a ranged unit, do apply to scouts. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the units, but do keep that in the back of your head. Next is Tome of the Warband. The main thing this is for is the lieutenants, which are a kind of cool unit I wanted to mess around with. And Bred for War to give more hit points to our very squishy units. Next is Tome of Sandstalkers. This is mostly going to be for, to stick kind of to the theme of being Redguards. Grand Bazaar is a very, very fun building, however. Huge economy boost when you're playing around sand. You do want to play around sand. Dune Stalkers will also give you a boost of flanking damage. Very potent when you're running a bunch of fast scouts who can circle around the enemy and start shooting them from the sides and the back, getting this bonus on top of everything else you're doing. Inquisition is a must-have if you're going to run any sort of order ranged build. Inquisitor's Mark lets you inflict Condemned with all your ranged units. Tome of the Beacon. This is mostly here for Mighty Meek. That is the main purpose. It is going to give even more damage and status resistance and reduce the upkeep of all your low tier units. The rest of it is not really important. You can use chaplains if you wish. However, we're going to have a much better support called the Oracle at tier 3 with Tome of Prophecies, as well as Fated Projectiles to buff our ranged units even more. On to tier 4. Tome of Supremacy. You can start to replace frontline units with Exemplars if you wish. Anthem of Victory is really strong. Condemn Army is extremely strong because this makes everything start the fight with Condemned. Tome of Prosperity has a very interesting combination actually with Tome of the Sandstalkers, where your Grand Bazaar is going to help get you a lot of food from adjacent sand provinces. Tome of Prosperity is then going to turn your food into additional gold. So your sand tome is going to help you get a huge population boom early on from being near sand, and then that same population boom, once you hit population cap, will then turn into a gold boom, which is such a fun little combo that plays into each other. And then when you get to late game, you have much, much more economy. And don't forget, you're running lots of cheap units, which means you can field a ridiculous amount of annoying scout armies. Blessed Armors is also nice. Staves of Grace is great. Everything here is nice. You could even field a few Prosperity Dragons if you want to. Then Tome of Exaltation. At this point, we're just kind of rounding things out. If you want to turn your units into angels, you can. Shrine of Smiting is really good. Ascended Warriors is really good. This is more of a theme tome. This is to play around the Sword Saint theme and kind of trying to ascend all of your faithful units to a higher level. Angelic Transformation does not replace your chariots. I don't believe. I think they just get flying and the celestial unit type, but they're still on chariots and they're still reduced to 1 unit per formation when it comes to your scouts. And then Tome of God Emperor, who cares? No one cares about tier 5 tomes anyways. Either you won the game or you haven't. Alrighty, let's go over the units then. We'll first kind of skim over the units we're not using. We are not using looters whatsoever. They're basically a downgrade from the scouts. I don't think they're a terrible unit, but that being said, I don't know if I would ever really use them in a world where these really fucking strong scouts exist. We'll talk about them soon. Wind Warriors are fine early game. You are welcome to use them as a front line because you do need something to kind of hold the ground before your scouts can get in and do damage. They are going to get a lot of our buffs from later stuff. However, in the early game when they're actually useful, they're not really going to have that many enchantments going on since we're not really focused on melee buffs anyway. Dustweavers, again, are fine. They're not great, but they're fine. They're functional, but they're a little slow. They don't really help the aggressive playstyle. Keep one around in an army early game, but eventually you will want to swap all of these out. And the tier 3 Collector is another unit that I completely ignored. It's not that I think this unit is bad, it's just it did not fit the playstyle, and I really was not setting up this faction to make the most of them. Again, I don't have a lot of melee buffs, so they're kind of underwhelming in their current state, so I didn't really draft any of them. So you can ignore them for this build as well. And then Exemplars, optional. But now let's focus on the units we are actually going to use. Here is the Ruler, of course, in all her glory. When with the Cleric route for Battle Saint, I'm not sure which route I would go, but we're definitely focused on the Order stuff. This is the Champion Ruler that I would use in its stead, Sai Sahan. And then this is how basically I built all of the heroes in this faction, as they are the main frontline tip of the spear, run in, hit something really hard while your scouts harass people from the flanks. Lieutenants are an interesting unit. They're a tier 2 fighter. I mess with them a little bit. They are optional cavalry, which means they are going to benefit from our chariots, and thus they have no casualty penalties. They do look very cool, don't get me wrong. They are going to get buffed by all our defensive buffs. Blessed Armor late game, Bred for War for extra health very early game, Doomstalkers for flanking damage. Discern Weakness. Target enemy unit and all units of that type gain Sunder Defense. So if you target a archer, all other archers on the field are going to get reduced defense and resistance and an infinite range. It is really strong when it works. This is why there's one in each pack, because the whole point is to soften things up for your ranged units to kind of roam around, play very aggressive, and blow everything to hell. This is a Dune Rider. This is possibly one of the most broken units in the game. I'm not even kidding. This is not verbatim. This is not exaggeration. These things are ridiculous. So it is a scout unit with a special trait called Warfare Training. This unit counts as both a ranged unit and a scout unit, which means it also, not only does its base damage do a lot more than it should for a scout, while still being cheap as hell as a tier 1 unit, you also get access to all of the scout and ranged unit enchantments and transformations. This means we have access to Sprint, which gives us Slippery. No other archers have access to this. Our tier 2 archers have a means of doing something similar, but this is a unique trait for archers to begin with. On top of having mounted units plus Sprint is a lot of speed. They can cover a lot of ground. The nice thing about having a mobile archer is that you use less movement points to go farther, meaning you can still move and get 2 shots off instead of just 1 shot off for the same distance. You also get Wayfinder enchantment, which means all of your squishy tier 1 archer units never die when they rout and they return quicker, which means you can do a lot of a really annoying hit and run tactics where you just hit someone's army and pepper them with arrows from a safe distance, make them run into you, pick off a bunch of units, and then full retreat all of your scouts out completely. Just pull everyone off the map and make them rout, and then they will all respawn back at base. So you could be on the other side of the planet on a Lost Cause campaign, hit an army with just a swarm of scouts, and then full route retreat them, and they'll all respawn at your base later to do it again and again and again, kind of giving you an immortal annoying scout army, which can just terrorize people. You can't do this with archers. You can only do this with scouts, but scouts usually suck. They usually don't do enough damage. Here's the secret sauce. Not only are they archers, which means their base damage is just straight up better than a normal scout, they also have a special thing on their bow called Opening Shot. First attack in a turn deals 50% damage. Your tier 2 archers also possess this Opening Shot. This is something kind of unique to the archer class units in the nomads. Then we can buff the absolute hell out of this with Legion of Zeal, which is going to give us increased spirit damage. Then that damage is going to be increased on condemned units. Inquisitor's Mark means our archers can condemn the units themselves, which means if the first shot lands condemned, you have the 50% damage bonus. The second shot does 10% more damage. If the next scout rolls up and shoots an already condemned unit, that's a 60% damage boost for the first shot. But then it can get even better. We have Fated Projectiles giving increased critical chance, and a lot of it. Now, eventually you'll get tired of those, and you'll want to upgrade to something even stronger, a little less expendable, but stronger, bringing in the Striders, which are a natural upgrade to your tier 1 scouts for when you need a little more oomph. They have a stronger base attack. They still come with the same Opening Shot that you're used to. They have a special ability that lets them teleport for free and gain fortune. This is what I meant by they have their own form of Slippery to get out of melee range and be able to fire for full damage. This is how they can do that. It also gives them insane mobility because they're mounted. They are optional cavalry, so we put them on mounts. They can move and teleport, getting a ton of distance either away or to chase a target down. And then, of course, they benefit from all of the usual insane buffs because they are only a tier 2 unit, so they still benefit from Mighty Meek, on top of all the really strong range buffs we're stacking, making them just a flat-out upgrade over our tier 1 scouts. So you can build a ton of tier 1 scouts. The ones that survive are still lethal. And then you can start to slowly upgrade and replace them with tier 2 Strider archers as you push into the later game. And even these are not too expensive, but they are about almost double the upkeep. So it depends how many armies you kind of want to field at once. But as you can see, your economy game can get pretty out of control pretty fast. Only other unit to really note and talk about, and I did not have many in this particular campaign, but they are extremely strong, are the Oracles. You will be able to buff them up with things like Supreme Magic. It looks like I did not cast it in this playthrough because, again, I was not really playing with them too much. They aren't going to be your strongest unit because they don't really get a lot of support from our enchantments. However, their buffs are insanely strong. True Strike and Fortune in a 1 hex radius is really good. Nice thing is we don't really get a lot of sources of Fortune on our units, so it's not like we're going to overcap. Fortune, I believe, caps at 3. which means if you cast this on a pack of your Striders and then they do their teleport, they are now fully buffed. And True Strike means they cannot miss for that turn. So you can buff up a pack of Striders, teleport them, and then on that turn they have 3 stacks of fortune, and can fire all 3 of their projectiles with perfect accuracy. It is very, very lethal when you can get the setup going and time it right. And then they have a very, very strong heal that also lets you shake off the next hit that comes, which is very useful when you're running a lot of really, really squishy units like scouts. It makes them more annoying. You run up, you hit the scout, recognition shakes it off. You hit the scout again, okay, it took damage, but it didn't actually care because they're on chariots. They don't take casualties. Next turn, it pops swift, runs away, and shoots you for twice the damage you hit it for, and you're dead. And there you have it. That is the scout-focused Redguard build that I've put together for Age of Wonders 4. Like I said, the ruler's a bit of a stretch. If you don't like it, go with a champion with Sai Sahan. That's probably more fitting and what more people would probably prefer. Maybe I'll put him in the thumbnail. I'm not exactly sure. But I do love this version of the build. The scouts are the main star of the show. They are so broken that I want to make more builds around the scouts, but I'll probably put it to the side. I will be shocked if they don't nerf the scouts in some way, either taking opening shot away from them or something. Because as they currently stand, I think they might be the most efficient tier 1 unit in any hero, in any culture roster in the game. If you have not played with the nomads, I implore you, play with the nomads and give the scouts a try. They are no joke. Otherwise, if you've enjoyed this, like, subscribe, do the YouTube things, you know what to do. Let me know what you think of the build in the comments, and let me know if you have any suggestions for other builds you'd like to see me put together. Most of them are Elder Scrolls related lately, but they don't have to be. So if there's anything you want to see put together, let me know. I will see what I can do. Next one will probably be Tainted Grail themed. So this is a fun one. This is an interesting one. So keep an eye out for that one. That one's gonna get a little wacky. You might see some other ideas dancing around in here, but I digress. That is enough for today. Thank you all for watching. Until next time.